Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Wednesday night HA Zoom series. Thank you to everybody who's joined us here live on Zoom, those who are watching our Facebook live stream, and thank you to everybody who's listening in tomorrow on J-Air or watching the YouTube recording. We have had a week in the Jewish community here in Australia. The Hillel Fool debacle has sent shockwaves through our community, and our friends at Magen David Adom, we really wish them the best, and we really wish that you still support their event coming up. But it's been a shock for all of us, and it really does underpin what is going on in this country. We have a fantastic guest with us tonight, Andrew Wallace. He is a coalition member for Fisher and chairman of the Australia-Israel Allies Caucus in Parliament. We're talking tonight about protecting Australia's values in a divided world, and it could not come at a more poignant time. We are so grateful to have Andrew Wallace with us, and we will be doing an interview with our CEO, Robert Gregory. If you have any questions for Andrew, please use the raise hand button. But for now, I'd like to hand over to CEO Robert Gregory. Thank you.
Thank you to Neil, and thank you for joining us tonight, Andrew. It's a big honor for AJA to host you. I think before we get into some of the juicy political topics, we'd like to first hear about yourself and about why you have a particular interest in protecting the Jewish community, Israel. What are some of the values that guide you?
Well, thanks very much for having me, Robert, and good evening to everybody. Look, I think my experience with the Jewish community, I put it up front. I'm not a Jew. I'm a Catholic. I go to church every Sunday. I'm committed to my own faith. But I remember, I think the first real interaction that influenced me was going back when I was in year 12, studying English literature, when we read the book Schindler's Ark. And that book profoundly touched me. I could not comprehend the extent of human depravity that led to the Holocaust. And I think that was the first real connection that I had with the Holocaust, and it really did profoundly impact upon me. When the movie came out, Schindler's List, some years later, I remember being in the cinema, and I wanted to go and see it because I knew that the book had such an impact on me. And I remember being in the cinema at the end of the movie, and I was weeping with such sorrow that human beings could do this to one another. And I felt, in retrospect, quite foolishly, but I felt ashamed that I was so upset. And I was almost as though I was glued to my seat. I remember, watching all the credits, and I was with my wife, and I was weeping. And I think, once again, the movie had a significant impact on me. And I thought, if ever I had an opportunity to make some impact upon ensuring that never happened again in the world or in Australia, I would step up. And some decades later, I found myself as a federal member of Parliament, and I had travelled to Israel with AJAC on a number of occasions, and it really impacted upon me, particularly getting to Sderot. I think Sderot had a significant impact on me as well. This was before October 7. And then when October 7 happened, at the time I was the chair of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence, so the deputy chair of the PJCIS, the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security. And we were shown the 43-minute video by the Israeli ambassador, Amir Maimon, and that had I think a life-changing impact on me. And only a couple of days after that, AJAC offered to send me back to Israel, and I knew I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go because that video was really quite distressing. But I didn't want to go, but I felt compelled to go. I felt like I needed to go because I knew instinctively that there would be people around the world and people in Australia who would reject what happened on October 7, that there would be people that would say, "Oh, it never happened," that like the Holocaust deniers. There would be people that would try and rewrite history. So I wanted to go and see for myself with my own two eyes, to the extent that I could post the event, to see what happened and to really get a better understanding of what went on October 7.
And can you tell us a bit about your role as chair of the Israel Allies Caucus? What does the caucus do? Is there broad support for it? Who are the members, or generally who are the members, and what type of work does it do?
So there are many countries there are many organisations, or what we call parliamentary friendship groups, in the parliament in Australia and around the world. The Israel Allies Caucus is not a parliamentary friendship group. The Israel Allies Caucus doesn't fall under the auspices of the Commonwealth Parliament. The Israel Allies Caucus is an international movement of around. I'm sorry, I've forgotten the number, but it's around 51, I believe, parliaments around the world, where the members of parliament in that particular country support the state of Israel and support Jewish communities within their own respective electorates. In Australia, we had, prior to the election, around 38 or 39 members. I haven't done the maths since the election, but those numbers will have dropped off since then. But those members are coming from the coalition. The Israel Allies Caucus is not only open to members of the coalition. It's open to all members of parliament and senators. But unfortunately, the only members from the Australian Parliament at this point in time come from the coalition.
And we should congratulate you on your new role that you've got, the Shadow Cabinet Secretary. Can you tell us a bit about this role, what it involves?
Yeah, look, very, very simply, it's a little bit like being a company secretary. My job is effectively to be an administrator of the Shadow Cabinet, making sure that everybody gets to the meetings, making sure that they fulfil any obligations that they might have to the Shadow Cabinet in the presentation of submissions that are to be considered by Shadow Cabinet. And I also have a similar role in relation to the Shadow Expenditure Review Committee. So it's a privilege to be at the Shadow Cabinet table. I don't serve on the Shadow Cabinet as a member of the Shadow Cabinet, but I sit in the room. I record the minutes, but also Susan has been very clear that she wants me to take an active role in the debates and consideration, and same applies in relation to the Shadow Expenditure Review Committee. So that's another entirely different role, but any policies that will be considered by the coalition, and particularly in the lead up to the next election, that require particular sources of funding, that has to be approved. If it's going to cost money, it needs to be approved by the Shadow ERC, and I'll fulfil that secretary's role on that body as well.
And as you mentioned, you're not Jewish, but you did face anti-Semitism on the campaign trail. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I did. Look, it was quite distressing. It was distressing for me. I can only imagine it was a very small window of, I think, what Jewish people in Australia experience in the form of anti-Semitism. I had many of my signs, small and large, graffitied with swastikas and the hook and cross, I should say, to be more technically correct. And all sorts of vile language that was spray painted on my signs, my trailer included. So it gave me an insight into the anti-Semitism that's being experienced by not just Australians but Jewish people around the world.
And speaking of anti-Semitism, as Tennille mentioned, it's been quite a week for Australia and for the Jewish community with some of the decisions from the government. First, we had the cancellation of a visa for a visiting speaker, Hillel Fuld, who's known to our organization. And that was, we thought that was, it couldn't get any worse. And that was quickly followed by the unprecedented imposition of sanctions by the Australian government on two cabinet ministers in Israel. So I might ask you to share some thoughts on that, what you think may have motivated that, what the coalition's policies are towards these issues.
Well, the coalition has been very strident in its support for Israel and the Jewish communities in Australia. Under Peter Dutton in the previous government, and I'm very confident that Susan Lee, as the new coalition shadow leader, will be very supportive of Israel as well. As to why the Labor Party have consistently, over the last 3 years, tried to isolate Israel and antagonize Israel. We can only offer theories, but I'm quite confident that these things were being done to provide for political purposes, effectively to appease the Muslim vote, certainly to appease the hard left of the Labor Party. It's interesting, I think, that there's no one within the Labor Party now that is a vocal supporter of Israel. Or if they are not vocal. We once had the likes of Mike Kelly and Michael Danby, who were members of Parliament, who were very vocal in their support of Israel. They are still, to their credit, very vocal in their support of Israel as former Labor members. But it just seems that the left of the Labor Party are prosecuting their own political agenda for domestic purposes, and unfortunately, the Labor Party doesn't have anyone out there that is prepared to stand up for it.
We've noticed the same. Those people you mentioned are obviously friends of AJA, and Kimberly Kitching was another one in Labor.
Absolutely. My late friend Kimberly, we were on opposite sides of the fence, but Kimberly was a great champion of Israel, and I still her absence is felt very significantly across the Parliament.
Yeah, she was a previous guest at one of these AJA Zooms. One of the theories I think you've speculated is that perhaps the government is trying to put a bit of distance between itself and the Trump administration, or show some difference. And since the re-election of the Trump administration, we've seen some changes, particularly when it comes to how they handle university anti-Semitism by withholding funding when it comes to refusing visas for people who express anti-Semitic views. Do you think either of those ideas or some of the other things the Trump administration is bringing in could be adapted, or some of the lessons could be applied in Australia?
Well, could they? They could, but there's. I think it's pretty safe to say there's zero prospect of that happening in Australia under this current government. Um, when you look at what happened on university campuses over the last since October 7, and the willful blindness that this government has just failed to engage, failed to challenge universities. They've flat out refused Julian Leese's constant requests to institute a judicial inquiry into what's been going on in and on campuses. I think there's no chance of this government adopting any of those same approaches of Trump. In fact, what we are now seeing from this government is a predisposition to want to be seen to be different from the Trump administration. I think that the Prime Minister probably sees that there is political advantage in him doing so. And you'll see the Prime Minister getting up and talking about, as he did today, that the Australian government will make its decisions based on its own what's in its own interest. Now, there's nothing wrong in principle with the Australian government acting on its acting on issues on their own merits. I don't have a problem with that in principle. But I think that we are seeing a disturbing stepping away from what is our closest defence ally in the United States. We have a government that is continuing a business as usual defence spend in Australia in times when the government itself recognises that we're at our most geostrategically dangerous time since 1945. The Australian government, particularly this Australian government, is happy to rely upon the defence umbrella of the United States, but in the same breath is quite willing to seem to be very different from the United States and to make calls which, as we saw from today, where Marco Rubio has indicated that the decision to sanction the two Israeli ministers is not going to further the prospects of peace.
So it's often in oppositions that it's easier to adopt some policy changes rather than in government, and then to take them to an election and implement them. And a couple of areas where perhaps there's room for some change. One of the areas that many in the Jewish community were unhappy with the Morrison government was over the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. They felt that it was only done in half the city. The Australian embassy wasn't moved as the Trump administration did. And in the end, it was easy for the Albanese government to reverse that measure. So do you think on both the issue of changes to Australia's policy on Jerusalem or Australia's approach to the so-called two-state solution, where we know that some in the US administration are changing their views, is there any debate in the coalition or room for change in those areas?
Look, I don't want to nail the coalition down to a particular position in relation to either of those two different issues. They are very significant, and I think that that we would need to go through the proper processes, through the party room processes, through shadow cabinet, before I make any sort of announcements here today.
So yeah, that makes sense. So I think we've got a lot of people with their hands raised. So I think we may go over to Neil to do some Q&A.
Thank you, Robert. Great to see so many hands raised. Let's start with Jeff. Please unmute.
Greetings, Mr. Wallace. As we
Hi,
all seem
Jeff.
to, hi, as we all seem to know that communism or socialism in its purest form are totalitarian entities and manifest failures. They need scapegoats to draw attention to their multiple failures of policy, so it is no wonder they need a scapegoat as well, and Israel seems to suit their purpose, raison d'etre. Do you think is it not a shame that not one member of the Labour Party, the Australian government, mind you, is prepared to openly support Israel and or join your Israel coalition, which is an international organisation? I think this is shameful. What do you think?
Well, I think they are very mindful. I think Labor members are very mindful of their colleagues. I think they are mindful of their pre-selections. And there's no denying that under this government, the Labor Party has moved to the left. In Anthony Albanese, we've got one of the most socialistic prime ministers that we have had in many, many years. He I think carries the air of a centre left prime minister very well. He's not seen to be by broader mainstream Australia as being too far to the left, but a leopard doesn't change his spots. And I think that as time goes on, particularly with the now parliamentary majority that he has, we will start to see the Labor Party really starting to show their true colours over the next 3 years. And I think that goes for the Prime Minister himself as well.
Thank you. Hugh Kitson, would you like to unmute, please?
Hi, Andrew. We met last May, when AJA brought out Colonel Richard Kemp to Australia, and we showed part of Whose Land documentary I produced in Parliament. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you for taking the stand that you have with the Israel Allies Caucus. I've actually known Josh Reinstein for many, many years, and I just want to encourage you in that. And if there's anything I can do or AJA can do to support you, we'd love to do that. But I've got a question, and it is to do with the two-state solution, because I fully recognize that you can't speak for the coalition. It's got to go to the various party rooms. But today, Penny Wong reiterated that the only way that there can be peace between the people known as the Palestinians and the Israelis is a two-state solution. And evidence is quite contrary to that. Do you think there is room for the coalition to recognize that fact?
I think there is room for a discussion about this issue. And look, I read a lot of the transcripts of what Penny Wong has said in the media throughout the course of the day. And it's a very one-sided, lopsided view of what's happening in the Middle East at the moment. Penny Wong has on a number of occasions today said that the sanctioning of these two individuals, whether you agree with it in principle or not, whether you agree with what they have said, and I think that there are a lot of people that don't agree with the remarks of these two ministers. But she has said that part of the rationale in sanctioning these two ministers is because Israel, in the prosecution of its war in Gaza, has demonstrated that it is not serious about a two-state solution or a lasting peace. But for me, that fundamentally either misunderstands, and she's a very intelligent woman, it either misunderstands the status of what's happening in Israel, or it's trying to misrepresent what's happening in Israel, because it fundamentally glosses over the fact that, in my mind, Israel did not start this war. Israel is constantly subject to bombardment from rockets and missiles from its neighbours. And, I've remarked in Parliament many times when I've spoken about this, that this war could be over today if Hamas were to surrender and to return the hostages. And that, for Penny Wong to constantly lay the blame of what is happening in Gaza at the feet of Israel, I think it's either a fundamental misunderstanding or a misrepresentation of the facts on the ground. I want to give her the benefit of the doubt. Part of me does. But, when she had an opportunity, albeit very, very late in the piece, to visit Israel, she refused to go to the sites of the massacres, and I think that was a fundamental failure on her part. I described that in various op-eds as willful blindness, that she didn't want to see what happened, because that would confront her views, predisposed views of the world. So I don't know if that answers your question, Hugh, but I think that there is scope for a discussion. Going back to what Penny has said, the two-state solution is, I think that most of us would recognise that we would like to see a lasting peace, but we're now seeing an environment where, as far as I can see, Israel is now stepping away from the two-state solution. It appears that the Trump administration is doing the same. And there's a lot of criticism being brought to bear on Israel and now the US about that. But yet nothing is ever talked about how the Palestinians have consistently rejected the two-state solution over decades. So I think, the international community is saying there can only be a lasting peace through a two-state solution, but where the two main protagonists don't seem to want it, what prospect is there of its success, or of it even happening in the first place?
Well spoken. Thank you, Andrew. David Cohen, would you please unmute?
We haven't talked about the Quran. So lots of people talk about radical Islam, and trying to pretend that there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the Quran. But I believe there is, and I've done a report that I try and get attention to, but everyone shouts me down or runs away. Can I email you?
Sure. That
Thank
was an
you,
easy one. Thanks, David.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe all MP information and contact details is available online.
Absolutely.
Solomon, please unmute.
Just do a Google search on me, and you'll find my email, David.
Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Thank you, Andrew. My question is about 18C, the Racial Discrimination Act. And during the time of the Morrison government, some within the government were strongly wishing to remove 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act. It's the same section, of course, that the ECAJ are in court aiming to resolve the issue of the hate preacher with. Notwithstanding that the election was only recently, what's the current mood with respect to 18C inside the coalition?
Solomon, we have met once as a coalition since the election, look, I'm certainly not going to bind the coalition to any position in relation to 18C. I'm sorry to disappoint. It's probably not what you want to hear, but we have a lot of soul searching to do over the next certainly 12 months in listening to the Australian public as to where and why we went so poorly in the last election. Look, 18C may form part of those discussions, but it's probably not as high on the list of issues that we need to deal with immediately.
Thank you. Alan Friedman, would you like to unmute, please?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Andrew. We are currently watching with great interest the trial involving alleged hate speech by a Sydney imam. And to the Jewish community, this is not simply a case of religious differences, but rather a test of what sort of country we want Australia to be. Are we going to be a Western country based on Judeo-Christian values, or are we going to end up looking like some cities in Europe that are increasingly becoming dominated by political Islam? Do you think the average Aussie sees it this way and appreciates how serious this situation is? Or are we just being a bit particularly sensitive to this issue?
That's a really good question. Can I say perhaps a bit of both? I'm very concerned that Australians that we as a country are losing our Judeo-Christian principles. But I'm perhaps even more concerned that no one seems to care. I think we are moving in the same direction, sadly, as I think Canada is a good example, where we have this this modern country that was once based on Christian Judeo principles, but through multiculturalism, and multiculturalism has its benefits, but it also has its problems. But it's a little bit like the old saying: if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. But I really do feel that we're sort of sleepwalking into this this sort of chasm, and I do think that it's very much being driven by the left of politics, in the same way that Canada is under Trudeau has trod down this same path. So I am concerned about the departure of our traditional values, but I'm even more concerned that Australians just don't seem to care too much.
Thank you. An, would you like to unmute, please?
Hello. So back to David Cohen's question about the Quran and mostly about Islam. If democracy is based on majority rules, what happens if, and this is because Europe is getting more Islamized due to birth rates of Muslims, if Islamists decide to invoke or vote for Sharia law, which would pretty much abolish women's rights, gay rights, and a lot of human rights violation, but it is democracy. I mean, majority rules. So
I missed that. I missed your question, Arne.
I think he's had a sound problem there, Andrew, so might just have to. His question seemed to be that if the demography changes enough, there might be a majority that votes for Sharia law or something like that. And that's democracy.
Well, that's democracy, David.
Yeah.
You know, that's the principle by which we have that the majority rules. Now, let's hope it doesn't get to that point in Australia.
Okay. Jason, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yeah, thanks, Tadil. Good evening, Andrew. Look, just a couple of points before I ask my question. Firstly, I'm Albury-based, so Susan's my local member. I have a vast amount of respect for her because she was instrumental in getting me my DVA invalidity pension, so I owe her a huge debt of thanks for that.
Okay.
Trouble is, having spoken to her in person, I know she's a great fan of the two-state solution, which I think everyone here, I can't speak for everyone, but I'm sure that most people have very little time for that. Now, unlike our beloved foreign minister, when I went to Israel in March, I made a point of going to Nova. My host took me there, and it was as horrible as I thought it would be.
Yeah.
The question I've got is, with all of that, how likely is it that the coalition, you may not be able to answer this, but how likely is it that the coalition will pursue this two-state nonsense? Because everyone knows it's not going to work. Palestinians don't want a state.
You're right, Jason. I mean, I really can't speak for the coalition. The current policy of the coalition is the two-state solution, and I've articulated my views a moment ago on where we have a situation where the protagonists, neither protagonist wants to be a part of the two-state solution, and yet there are many countries in the world that are continuing to push this. How realistic is it that it will ever happen? At the current state of play is if you've got the Palestinians who don't want it and Israel doesn't want it, the United States now seems to be walking away from it. You know, it seems to be unlikely. In some respects, the two-state solution is when we had a situation where Israel was supportive of the two-state solution, where we had at least Israel that was supportive of it, or parts of the government that were supportive of the two-state solution. The United States was supportive of it. There was some prospect of achieving peace via that process. But I just can't see how that is going to happen at this point in time. Now, that might change with changes in administration in various countries. I don't know. It's very hard to see how it's going to work at the moment. Does that mean that we shouldn't continue it? Does that mean that it should be abandoned? Well, I mean, that's a conversation to be had. The challenge that I have as a legislator, as a political leader, is that if a two-state solution is not on the cards anymore, well, what is? We know what the Palestinians want. The Palestinians want a one-state solution that doesn't involve Israel, the state of Israel. But equally, if you flip that coin, what does a one-state solution look like without Palestinians? If I had the answers to these questions, I probably wouldn't be the shadow cabinet secretary.
Michelle, would you like to unmute, please?
Hi, thank you for letting me speak, but also thank you for your support. Really interesting conversations. I am aware, and I've seen footage and information of Albanese and Penny Wong being registered as Chinese under the Chinese Communist Party. So one of the things I learnt was that Palestine and the disruption and anger keeps the people separate, also keeps him able to pass legislation while people are looking elsewhere, basically. So that's one part I just wanted to say as I was listening to you.
Michelle, you've just gone on mute, Michelle.
Might have been more of a comment, I think maybe she was making.
Yeah. Sorry, I was cut off. In regards to the Liberal government, though, it's the Z generation that doesn't want to vote Liberal at the moment. And to be honest, I see the Liberal government, as much as I actually am a Liberal voter, I see the Liberal government as two sides of the same plane, two wings of the same plane. And it's only when it'll become the plane and not a wing on the opposite side that we might actually have some sort of beginning of solutions in that. Instead of just being for Israel, and I'm not saying not to, I'm saying, but instead of that, the focus, if we're going to ever attract the younger population, would be to be focused on what you're actually talking about, which is humanity. And therefore, that would be part of bringing it back on track.
No, we've lost you again, Michelle.
I
think it's a comment rather than a question.
I didn't really see a question in that.
Yeah, she's dropped out.
Anyway, Andrew, I'd like to ask you about a little bit more about the parliamentary friends of. So I understand there's parliamentary friends of Israel. We've heard when people come to power that they were former members of the parliamentary friends of Palestinians. I know there's different parliamentary friends of medical technology or this or that. How involved are these groups? How much power and how much impact do they have compared to for instance, the Australia-Israel Alliance Caucus that I understand that you're heading as well? I'd like to know a little bit more about the differences, the impact, and what these groups really mean.
Thanks, Danielle. Look, it entirely depends to a great extent upon the members of the parliamentary friends. The parliamentary friendship groups, and almost every country has one within Australia. I'm involved in many different. My staff say far too many parliamentary friendship groups. Some, we have parliamentary friends of seafood, parliamentary friends of Ukraine, parliamentary friends of Israel, parliamentary friends. I wanted to start a parliamentary friendship against parliamentary friendship groups because we have too many. As to their ability to be able to affect change, it's not so much. It's more of an awareness thing for the members of that group to be able to become more aware. I know I'm the chair of the parliamentary friendship group for mental health. Mental health is an important issue for Australians, and anything I can do to try and raise the level of understanding of Australians and their mental health is a good thing. As far as how much it influences policy of the government of the day, I think it really depends upon who's driving it, and how receptive the relevant ministers are to that particular issue. Parliamentary friendship groups are very different to the Israel Allies Caucus, which I am the chair of. Because parliamentary friendship groups fall under the auspices of the Parliament, they have members from the Liberal Party, the National Party, the Labor Party, the Greens, and because it's this, and the crossbench, and because it's this sort of mismatch of, or that's probably not a good use of the phrase, because it spans the political divide. You can't get any motions across or up that would, for instance, criticise the government on its position on mental health or in relation to Israel, for example. The Israel Allies Caucus doesn't fall under the auspices of the Commonwealth Parliament. Because there are no members from the Labor Party, we are able to criticise the government. I don't have to worry so much about the views of the Labor Party, because there are no views of the Labor Party in the Israel Allies Caucus, because they just simply don't belong to it. So I hope that explains a little bit more to Neil.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Andrew. John Lockwood, would you like to unmute, please?
Thanks, Neil. Good to be with you once again, and to have Andrew as your special guest. And Andrew and I know each other well, and we were part of the relaunch of the caucus in October last year. And at the same time, we launched the Israel Allies Foundation, whose purpose it is to educate parliamentarians and their electorates about the truth of Israel. And I think one of the questions Michelle was trying to ask is, how is the Liberal Party going to influence the young people? Well, the only way that's going to happen is if we can get to our influencers, e.g. our parliamentarians, and get into their electorates to help educate those people. So the question that I'm asking Andrew is, how do we help get to those members and put our views across and help educate them and get into their electorates? What role does the caucus going to play in that?
Thanks, John. I think there's a bit of a misnomer around, and Michelle talked about this earlier, that that there was some sort of a chasm between the Liberal Party and young people. I don't accept that, and here's why. I do accept that there is a level of disconnect between the Liberal Party and some young people, particularly young women. But over the course of the election campaign, I had an opportunity to stand on pre-poll, and I talked with 2,000 people a day, and young men seem to be much more receptive to myself, Liberal Party values, our policies, our philosophies, very distinct from young women. So there's certainly a difference between young women and young men, and I know I'm generalising here, but we need to really tap into what happened. Why are we losing young women as opposed to young men? And this week, I'm visiting 20 towns in my electorate. My sole purpose for visiting 20 towns in my electorate is to get out and talk to as many people as I can to try and identify where we went wrong. And ideally, what I really want, that nub, I think that's a really key issue. Why are young women turning away from, and it's not just young women, to be perfectly honest, but that's a demographic which is fairly and squarely in my sights. Why are young women turning away from the Liberal Party? And I don't have any clear answers on that yet. We've got a lot of work to do over the next 12 months in the formulation of our policies. I don't think there's a clear answer for that. But to your point, John, I think politicians, particularly on my side of the political fence, we need to spend the next 12 months identifying where we went wrong. If we are able to, I do not believe that that on the Liberal side of things, the Liberal Party side of perspective, that I do believe that the Liberal Party members are much more attuned to what's happening in Israel. They want to they may not be experts on it, but they fundamentally, as many Australians do, they understand that Israel was attacked on October 7th by 2,000 Hamas terrorists. They killed 1,200 innocent Israelis. They took 250 hostages. The world seemed to support Israel for about 36 hours, and then the world seemed to turn on Israel. Long before the military campaign started in Gaza. Why did the world turn on Israel when Israel was the one that was attacked? I don't think, John, that the membership of the Israel Allies Caucus demonstrates this to me. I don't think that there is a lack of willingness to understand what's going on in Israel. I think, however, that we have a communication problem. I think that the Liberal Party has a communication problem. And I think that those who support Israel, including the State of Israel, has a communication problem.
Thank you, Andrew. Michael, would you please unmute?
First of all, AGA and Andrew, you guys are doing amazing stuff. I'm actually joining you now from Netanya. Yeah, no, sorry, I'm at work. I'm from Netanya, but I'm in Petah Tikva at work now in Israel. So I can tell you, Andrew, that I follow you on Facebook. You're amazing. Thank you very, very much for your support. Just a quick comment, because I'm sure there's a lot of other more worthy people than myself who'd like to say a few things. My only question to the Australian community, both Jewish and non-Jewish, why aren't we out there in the same numbers as the pro-Palestinian protesters are, whether it's in Sydney, Melbourne? I think that's somewhere we need to really make an effort to get out there and not to be ashamed to show our voice.
Thanks, Michael. I think that the answer to your question is simply, numbers. There are, the Australian Jewish community is very small. My understanding is it's a tick over 100,000, and there are many more people on the left side of politics that have a very twisted view of Israel, and that is supported in our education system from primary school, high school, and universities. I think that that's a real problem. And that anti-Semitism, that hatred of Israel, the hatred of the Jewish people, is inculcated throughout our education system. That is perpetuated. And, this is not new. Anti-Semitism is the oldest form of discrimination. This is not something that's just being experienced, as you well know, since October 7th.
Thank you. Anthony Burgess, would you please unmute?
Thank you very much, Andrew, for all your comments. Very recently, a Jewish woman, Sharon Tal, was refused participation in a professional meeting because she had an association with WIZO. I just wonder what your reaction would be if you applied to a builders conference, for instance, to participate and was refused for your current associations through the Israel Allied Caucus.
Well, Anthony, I'd be appalled. But I can say to you, Anthony, that and I'm not for a second suggesting that I have experienced the same level of anti-Semitism that Jewish Australians have, but I got a taste of it during the election, where people who were outwardly condemning me because of my support for Israel. And they were to the left of politics. So, I would be appalled, but it's already happening, just not in the building sector, but it's happening worse. It's happening through our electoral system. People were encouraged not to support me because of my stance on my support for Israel.
Disgraceful. Ashley Powers, would you please unmute?
Good evening, Mr. Wallace.
G'day, Ashley. We know each other.
Yes.
How are you?
Yeah, well, thank you.
Where are you, Ashley?
In Brisbane, in Dixon. So unfortunately,
You got a beanie on. You're giving us a bad name.
Yeah, sorry, I've had a skin cancer cut out, so I'm trying to
okay.
cover up the bandage. So, but I'm
Okay.
all good. But as a great person of values, and family values, been a great father of how was the viewing of the footage? How has that impacted you? I just cannot stomach the inversion of morals that people are coming out with, and I don't think any country would tolerate that. It just seems to be so much hatred and that was cast upon innocent women and children, particularly. And there seems to be some some moral inversion going on around the world. A government, to me, has a duty of care to protect its citizens and civilians and stuff. So,
Ashley, look, when I watched that video, I have to say it was pretty painful to watch. I don't know if you've seen it, but people ask me, I've heard about this video. Should I watch it? My response is no, don't watch it, because it's unbelievably graphic, and it really, I think, if you can think of the worst kind of graphic, violent video or movie that you might see on television or on a video, but this is real life. What is it now? A number of years now since, and I remember it very well. It's just depravity, vile. But I tell you what really sticks in my memory, perhaps the most, apart from the sheer broad scale violence, and that is when the hostages were taken from within Israel, and they were literally thrown into the back of utilities like they were, like a piece of meat. They were thrown in, and many of these people were badly wounded. And they were thrown in the back of these utes, driven back into Gaza. And what sticks in my memory, and I don't think I'll ever forget, is the return of those vehicles with the hostages was met with triumphalism, and the Palestinians in Gaza were, to say they were cheering was, an understatement. Now, I'm not suggesting that all Palestinians are bad people, but the Palestinian civilians that were on those videos, they were just exuberant in their joy at seeing these people having been taken hostage. Many of them badly beaten, wounded, shot. I don't think I'll ever forget that. And I'll tell you what else when I was in Israel in the kibbutz Kfar Azar, 2 months after, when the Hamas terrorists invaded Israel, when they had basically killed and taken hostage many Israelis, the place was very, very badly damaged. You could see the place was riddled with bullet holes, that there were heavy weapons that were also used, use of grenades, etc. But what really sticks in my mind is that we were told that after the wave of the Hamas militants that came in and killed and raped and took hostages, the Palestinian civilians then came afterwards and looted everything that wasn't nailed down. And when I was at Kfar Azar, the place had been stripped of every conceivable valuable: air conditioners, televisions, pots, pans, knives, forks. Everything had been stolen. Now, the Palestinian civilians that were involved in that, they would have been stepping over dead bodies to do that. And that also sticks in my mind.
Wow. Well, Andrew, unfortunately, we are out of time. I apologize that we didn't get around to everyone's questions. Before we sign off for the evening, I'll let everybody know about our Zoom next week. We have Michael. I apologize to Michael in advance, but hopefully he doesn't see this. Michael Lobovikov, the leader of the new reservist movement, and we are talking from refusnik to reservist, examining the plight of Israel's reservists and a vision for Israel's future. So we hope that you will all tune in next week. And more importantly, as well, I need to mention that next week we have a special Zoom that is from 7 p.m. to 7:30, where we'll be taking you through our upcoming AJA Israel tour. We'll be talking speakers, itinerary, and a Q&A for all the questions that everyone has about the trip. So that is 7 to 7:30. It's the same link as we always use, but we will send out more information in advance about that. Now, Andrew Wallace, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Oh, apologies. Thank you for your support for Israel, for our community, and for being a steadfast friend to us and giving us the feeling that somebody is there, somebody is taking a stance and doing the right thing. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you on, one of our most engaging Q&As. So thank you to everybody who asked a question. And again, thank you very much and have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks to Neil. Thanks to AJA for having me on.
Good evening.
Good evening.